Is there anybody else that you see that's not here that I should wait for, or shall we get started?
Everybody sees a notice that this meeting is being recorded.
Right.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Policy Committee of the Whole. The mandate is to discuss and make recommendations to the board on all matters related to bylaws, policy, and administrative procedures. I'd like to make an acknowledgement that and give thanks and acknowledgement that the lands on which we work and learn on are the shared traditional territories of the Qualicum and the Sinawas First Nations people. Thank you. Introductions. I think we know everybody that's on here, so I'm just going to go right into our agenda. Number 2 for discussion. Bylaw 1, Board of Education, and Elaine, I'm going to let you speak on that. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, that's a surprise. Okay, well, I do have some notes on bylaw 1. I will admit that. Previous to this run of trustees, we did have a discussion the last time we brought this forward, which was quite recent, around whether we wanted to look at changing the electoral areas. And I've done a lot of walking and a lot of thinking about it, and I don't know. I actually don't know how we balance the areas and still allow for the fact that we want trustees from the whole district, but then we are all trustees from the whole district. So I haven't got anything. I don't have anything specific to bring, but I sure want to discuss it again. And then the other part of it is to Laura's comment from way back when we discussed this last year. She indicated that area G beyond, and help me, Julie, it's Meadowwood and something else, that area.
That's part of area F.
Oh, it's part of area F, that maybe that required another trustee. I don't know what the motivation was, but I remember her saying
may
that.
not need another trustee. I mean, in terms of, well, here's the way I think about it. I mean, in terms of an electoral area, like for the RDN, Meadowwood, Corkin, is sort of an oddball outlier for area F. I mean, it makes much more sense that it would be sort of part of Bowser and whatnot. Just geographically in getting there, you have to, it's connected when you'll kind of look at a map, sort of, but it's not connected by road routes or anything. So, but I don't, from my perspective, I think, this is kind of interesting, Elaine, and I know you'd sort of brought it up before, because there's like Parksville, Qualicum, and maybe those want to be represented by different trustees. I guess what I kind of see is we are like working as one board, working toward the common goal. And yeah, we say we're elected in these various areas. And I do like that there are trustees in the Bowser area and the Neuse and out here where I am, because to me, there's sort of a representation of a different voice, the rural voice and the urban voice. And sometimes there's very different needs that need looking at for our students and staff in those areas. So I think it's great to have representation from those kind of areas. But I think in terms of the municipality sort of urban voice, that's covered by the way it is now. We could separate it further into quality, separate the two that are voted for Parksville Qualicum into one for Qualicum and one for Parksville. I'm not sure if that's a necessity at this point, but they are growing, especially Parksville, getting quite big. So that's all I have to say on that.
Thanks, Julie. Barry.
Yeah, it's a weird borderline. If you look up there, Bayless Road and up to Meadowwood, it just doesn't make any sense the way they ran it. So it's really confusing to know who's who in the zoo up there. And And also trustees represent an area. I represent area H, and Elaine represents her area, and she's got 4,200 votes and got elected, and I got elected with 80. So, you know, it's a very vast representational difference. But, you know, as I've said, my 80 votes count, you know, for 50 times what hers do. Not really, just kidding. You know, so, and also a person does not have to live in that area to run for it. You know, they can live somewhere else in another area. So, and that's really not representing things. So it's kind of a quandary in the way it is, but so far it's been working.
I think that's the municipal act. I think that's a municipal act, you know, thing provincially. So to shuffle it would be interesting, but.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's worth it to stir things up at this point. Like we seem to be, I guess the problem is that if we're going to change it, it takes 4 years or something. You know,
Yeah.
it's like we can't just pass a motion and say, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think I'm with Julie and Barry. The first past the post, and that's what Nanaimo is. They have 9 seats and everybody runs, and it doesn't matter if you're from Cedar or you're from Lanceville. It's the first 9 that get in and whatever. And we could say that we've been lucky in the past 2 rounds of elections and stuff to have first past the post and Parksville Qualicum have a Qualicum person elected and a Parksville person elected. But the process piece is a big deal, and we can't just say it and say that we want to do it. I mean, it requires a petition through whatever area, and let's just say we want to have one from each of Parksville, Qualicum, just change that much, delineate that. Then you're going to have whatever many people sign up to say, yes, that's how they want their school trustees selected, is by city limits of the, you know, Parksville and the town of Qualicum. And then you have to go to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And so if you're going to do anything, it's a pretty protracted process. Somebody tried to do it in 2003 when I was first elected, and basically he never got the votes from the people. I mean, I know I want to throw, you know, water on it. This, you know, I always think it's good to revisit these things and understand what everybody's thinking, but
It's another 18-year project. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, so, you know, these accolades, the 750,000 and kicking the can down the road for 20 years is very true. We have kicked that track down the road for 20 years. And so I do think that, you know,
Buried in there with the track.
the rural aspect is represented by having electoral areas. I think it's just pretty clean the way it is. And I guess you know, it's whether we felt really concerned that we weren't giving each of the town and the city residents enough, you know, to be able to say you each get to pick one, not just whoever comes first past the post and second. So.
You done there? Okay.
Yep.
Peter.
Yeah, I don't want to push you in either direction, but I do want you to consider a few things. In my previous district, the official trustee initiated this process. This is why I know a little bit about it. I don't know much. And it was a little bit more complicated than I would have thought. And he initiated it because of the ward system that occurred there with 9 different trustees, and wanted to create a little bit of a better balance among each of the wards. That was the initial intention, and go from 9 to 7. And actually, through stakeholder input, received a mandate to go to 5 trustees. And although the balance will never be perfect, that's a lot to ask for. There was an improvement, at least on that front. Yeah, it would take a little bit of time. So if you're going to do it, you want to do it prior to the next election, obviously. And so getting started now or near enough to now is probably important. I also think that one of the reasons that you might want to ponder this is because of the difference in constituencies. There is a vulnerability there that we didn't experience in the last election, but could rear its head in that an outside force that mobilize us to knock on doors and create or spread misinformation could persuade enough households to elect somebody that's not from here or not perhaps suitable for the role. Now, it's not for me to pick my boss. It's not for me to interfere. But that kind of manipulation needs to be safeguarded, in my opinion. And if there's something that we can do, to prevent some kind of exterior manipulation from occurring, then perhaps we should take that seriously.
I just wanted to chime in. Thank you, Peter. I think because we do represent the whole district, each of us are supporting schools that are not in our areas, or most of us are. And the factor that it could take only a few votes for one area to be elected, but you need thousands in the Parksville Qualicum area, I think. That doesn't sit well with me, that I don't know. I think it's worth looking at, even if it is just the Qualicum Parksville situation. Yeah, going forward, I think there needs to be some change, just because I've just gone through the election and realize how difficult it is in these areas. And, it's, yeah, I'm sure for somebody that's seasoned like Elaine, it was very nerve-wracking. But there could have been people that took her votes when she's obviously well seasoned and well suited for the job. Anyways, that's my thing. Yeah, Elaine.
Yeah, so I'm hunching I'm not running again. And so this would be an opportune time to push this on my part, I guess. And even though I don't know, I want to come up with something that makes sense. I lived in the Nanaimo Ladysmith School District for years on a small island called Gabriola, and a small politically active island called Gabriola. And we were always able to kind of push one trustee forward. I think, to Peter's point, I didn't sleep all that well when the election results from Area E didn't come in. I think I'm just going to say this straight out, even though we're being recorded, we were very close to losing someone on our board who has been an absolute leader, both here and provincially, and a long-serving, committed trustee. And I don't want that to happen again.
That's democracy for you, Elaine.
Pardon?
That's democracy for you.
Well, no, it's not, Barry. That's the thing. It's not
I'm
democracy.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Because in democracy, it would be one person, one vote.
I know, I'm kidding.
And so that's what I've been struggling with is the democratic process versus the fact that we do want to ensure that we have regional voice. So I'm bringing it back again. I don't know. The other thing about Parksville Qualicum Area G is, if you look at Area G, it is humongous. It is a huge area. And just the logistics of, if you buy signs, right? And I didn't buy a lot of signs. You got to buy 100 signs, right? Because you got to cover that whole area. And just the logistics of doing that, I think over the last 3 elections that I've been involved in, where there's been a member from Qualicum and a member from Parksville, it's just, I'm way better known in Parksville than I am in Qualicum. And Carol's spoken a bit to me personally about the fact that people just didn't know me in Qualicum. So I don't know.
Yeah. And I just want to chime in. There was so much misinformation. They were thinking that Elaine was Eve and Eve was Elaine. And it was just very, I don't know that changing the areas is going to correct that. Go ahead, Barry, and then we'll move on. We'll decide what we're going to do with this and then we'll move on. Go ahead, Barry.
Well, I know somebody in DPAC that I want to run.
Okay,
Even if
not
she's not
funny.
living there.
Funny, not funny. All right, was that your only comment?
That was my only comment.
All right, Elaine, and then I do want, I would like to decide what we're gonna either further discussion, make a motion. What would you like to do?
Well, I do have some other stuff on the bylaw number 1, so I didn't want to lose that. So
Okay.
just when you're done with this,
Okay.
I don't know where it's going, Carol.
Mhm.
Well, let it simmer then. Let it simmer.
Okay, yeah, we'll let it simmer.
Yeah.
Did you have other things that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, it's always important to go through these things and take another look at them, and I can look at them differently now. So I was looking at the on page 5, number 7.1, around the board's role, and the board evaluation came up.
Yeah,
And we haven't been very good at that. So I'm wondering if we
We did
want
one.
to either get better at it or take it out or do it every set 2 years or whatever. And so that's one thing. And then I also wondered if the numbers in 8, 10, and 11 are current with policy. I didn't check it.
8,
Section 8, 10, and 11.
okay, section 8, 10, and 11.
Yeah, and I don't like having numbers in stuff because I think
Right,
they always have to be updated.
right. So take a look at 8.
Where,
10.
where do you have 10 and 11 under section 3?
No, it's under
Yes,
section 8, page 5.
Fiscal accountability.
Yeah,
The question is when we do projects, sorry,
Where's
10
our
different
levels?
contracts over 50,000 and projects over 500.
Oh, 8.
Does that get put in front of you as a board to make a decision?
well, and also is that consistent with our policy? Because I think we have a policy around that as well.
Yeah, we have a tender policy.
Yeah. And then I've got something on page 7 around trustee code of ethics.
Okay. And where is that?
Page 7. So a lot of this stuff the last time around, just for your information, Carol, I took the trustee handbook, which
Right.
is not in policy. It's like it's not in governance, right?
Right.
So I took that and I took pieces out of it and just subsumed it into the bylaw.
Right.
But I started to think about this after the board chair, vice chair discussion that BCSTA had. And I'm wondering if we could massage it a little bit and make it not just a trustee code of conduct, but a trustee public code of conduct, and whether that might help us with the issue that we haven't had, that other boards have had all over the province with people being disrespectful in their board meetings.
Right.
So just an idea there.
Just to interrupt a little, sorry.
That's
I
fine.
think
I'm done.
under that section, we can maybe wait till the ministry and BCSTA bring their code of conduct template and suggested policies and best practices document down.
Okay.
I quite
What's
don't
your
know.
timing on that, Eve?
Well, that's what I was just about to say.
Sorry.
I don't quite know where and how where it's gone in the last month. You know, we launched it at the provincial partners meeting in February, said it was coming. We had another meeting in the beginning of March as a working group, and I'm a member of the working group as a representative from BCPC to the ministry / BCSTA code of conduct working group. And we've never met since, but everyone says it's coming, and we teed up all the board chairs, the superintendents and the secretary treasurers and everything else. And now it's radio silence. It's quite weird, and it will speak to a whole bunch of stuff there as to how far, because the conduct of meetings, section 70 of the School Act, which says you can summarily, literally remove a person from a meeting. And in the case of Zoom, you turn their microphone off if they are not being respectful and to the process. So, so I'm not wanting to kick the can down the road, But I think we'll see some things there that will align us to what the work of the province is gonna be in this regard. And so I just asked that we might see some more stuff there. I can't tell you when. I'm quite flummoxed as to what the problem is.
Okay,
Me too.
all right, Ron.
Sorry, to Peter's point about 8:10 and an 8:11, just quickly looking at the purchasing policy.
Yeah.
There's a line in there that talks about the opening of the tenders. To award a contract to other than the low bidder, it must first be approved by the board or supported in a written recommendation from the ST or designate. There's no value attached to it. And that's the only time kind of where the board is included into that kind of a process per the AP. The $50,000 threshold, I guess it kind of speaks to the discretion of the ST being purchasing decisions greater than $50,000 go through public tender process with the ST signing off as the approver. Again, it doesn't necessarily go through the board itself. But again, the board, per the AP, the board's authorization would only come into effect if the AP doesn't change, when the award is going to somebody other than the low bidder, if that helps. Again, so it really doesn't have a value attached to it, which is what Peter was indicating in the AP.
Ron, do you have a number that that you were talking about in the fiscal accountability area? Where you were saying that,
Policy numbers.
Yeah, so again, really, I'm just saying, so under 8:10 and 8:11, where it speaks to the approval of the tender selection for contractors over 50, it's not in the AP that the board deals
okay,
with that, right? The board doesn't, it's implied that it's done through the ST.
right,
And likewise, the approval of construction projects greater in excess of 500,000 isn't in AP either. The only time from the AP that the board gets involved, if you want, is for tenders that are being awarded to the non-low bidder.
Sorry,
And again,
point of clarification, which AP are you talking about?
tendering, purchasing, and disposal,
Right, so
101.
what, 101, I was gonna say it's in the hundreds, but I couldn't remember which one.
Yeah,
Right.
so 101, there's an awarding of tender, which like again, they're non-numeric, but anyway, sorry, they're not numbered. But
Right.
it's within the awarding of the tender, there's under D, and again, I'll just read it verbatim.
So these need to be cross-referenced.
Yeah.
Exactly, I think we've got a bit of a discrepancy that we need to look at.
Yeah. Anyways, suffice to say, more discussion for 8:10 and 8:11.
okay, thank you. All right, Julie.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing these up, Elaine. I agree. I think we have a bit of a problem if our bylaw is saying one thing and our AP and or policy is either not supporting that bylaw or it's contradictory. It's not quite contradictory, but it's not clear. So let's have a look at that and clear it up somehow.
Okay,
The other thing, Elaine, you mentioned was 7.1.
Yeah, the board evaluation one, because we
Yeah,
have board
and
evaluations.
I kind of, I feel like we do that when we do our trustee retreat in September. However, we could add a little more formality at the end and make an actual report out and ensure that, that we just touch on these things. It could be, we could have that little bit added piece at the end of our trustee retreat, because that's what I feel like the trustee retreat does. Where when we get together, we look at our priorities, we look at how they're aligning with the strategic plan and things like that. So we could perhaps have a little more, I think we usually do report out, but perhaps we can have more of a written document, a little more transparency or something, a little more formality around it. Those are my comments. Thank you.
thanks, Julie. Peter.
when we do larger projects, they all should be represented on the capital work plan that goes to the board every year. I don't see us doing something in the hundreds of thousands of dollars without that being clarified. I mean, Ron, you could contradict me on that if you have other information. It wouldn't be a bad thing to agree on a process criteria, perhaps around board performance, and then enshrine some kind of process into our practice of something to do a check-in. What kind of data do you want to collect on that? You know, what kind of questions would you ask in a self reflection type of activity? I think probably something should be formalized if it's going to be you know, in the bylaw like that.
Thanks, Peter. Ron, did you have another question or your hand's still up? Okay. Elaine and then Eve, and then we're moving on.
Okay, with the board evaluation stuff, you guys know, you who have been around for a while know that I'm big into evaluations of everything. And I was preparing a board evaluation for another group, one of the many, and it turns out BC, I don't know if it was BC school trustees, but I've got a binder that's got a whole bunch of evaluation materials in it. It's actually pretty good, and Eve's shaking her head. Yeah, it's pretty good.
And we've
We've
done it.
had, pardon?
And we've done it. We've done
And
it.
we've done it. And the thing is, we don't do it every year. So
No,
and
so
I
it's-
frankly don't know that we have time to do it every year. So maybe what we need to do is we need to say, okay, we'll do this twice in a term or something like that. And yeah, we've got the materials. We've done a deeper evaluation at one point, but really, I think it's just adequate enough to shed a little light on it. So that, I guess that's my final comment on that one.
Yeah, I'd agree with Elaine that, you know, we've done the self-evaluation checklist from BCSTA. We've had BCSTA come in and do an evaluation in our last full-blown, which I would say was pretty in-depth, was at the end of Kevin's time before Peter came with Julie McRae. And that was quite intensive. Look at our work, and then maybe I'll ship off the slides and the summary documents. Whether we make those public and things like that, for us to be able to say we are presently doing an evaluation and we'll be doing them twice in our term and whatever, I don't know. I mean, I know the one we did before with and Cooper, Jacob Gare was on the board. You know, he wanted to say things that he didn't want to have recorded and put down on paper. Now, that
Yeah,
doesn't mean that is, there's a way around that to say in broad terms, you know, we've done this, we reviewed it, and here are the key salient points. Similar to how we record in camera minutes, but there are people who, you know, and if we were by any chance a dysfunctional board, it could get quite different. And so just be careful. And I think, as Elaine said, exactly, you know, annually is just there's too much happening. If you can say twice in your term, you know, a more self-evaluation and a full-blown evaluation, that would be my goal to be able to hit. Yeah.
So we got enough juice for you guys now?
Ideas for writing up new
Are you
policies.
pointing at me? It's enough juice, Elaine. Okay, so going forward for that, the evaluation part, shall we just table that for now and? Or
Could we
just-
maybe have you guys look at this a little bit, like the whole bylaw?
Yeah.
And come back, maybe just sort of bring it forward in 6 months or so?
Yeah.
I guess if I were using Roberts, it would be a motion to defer for 6 months, blah, 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 but I'm not.
We don't
So,
do-
yeah, so could we just maybe do that? And by then, maybe we'll have more stuff from the BCSTA and.
Yeah.
you know,
And then the 8, 10, and 11, that's for further discussion. We're gonna look at that. And what about the election process? Further discussion?
Yeah, bring it back in 6 months and we'll bat it around again. Maybe people will think of a great idea.
Okay,
Yeah, I was just wondering, could somebody, maybe one of the trustees, so we're not putting it on staff, could Could one of us sort of do a little bit of homework on just what's involved with that, so we have that information? And I suppose I said it, I'll do it. Darn it, I
Thanks,
was
Julie.
not thinking this thing through.
You didn't take the pathway.
Okay, I will do the homework of just what's involved with that.
I
thank
go
you.
straight to the municipal affairs office.
Right.
They'll tell you. Yeah.
Okay, one last, Peter, a comment, and then we'll
Yeah.
move on to our next.
Oh, no, I really enjoyed that, Julie. Thank you. And it reminded me of when I was a brand new vice principal and I was standing in the office one day, noticing something was undone. Like, somebody needs to do something about that. And I thought, oh, oops. I guess that person's me. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and I wouldn't want to leave it 6 months. It may not take a full 4 years to make a change, but if you wanted to do something like that, having a good amount of runway is important. So if Julie was able to get back to us in a month or two and then revisit the conversation at that time, that would be, I think, very helpful. So it's
Okay.
much appreciated.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much. No further discussion. So we're going to go on to B, which is bylaw 3, meetings of the Board of Education. And Julie, I'm going to let you speak on this because you had requested us to take a look at it, and we're happy to do that.
Well, first of all, thank you, Peter and Carol, for throwing this on here. And oftentimes we don't see maybe some things that should be addressed until they actually get tested. And I feel like this bylaw had a little bit of a test at our February board meeting. So I just wanted to have a look at it. And that test was the order of the business of the meeting.
Right?
And it was interesting because maybe I misheard you, Elaine. But I thought I heard you say, well, we couldn't do it. It's Robert's rules, the business arising or something has to be where it's at. So I did, some quick looks on Robert's rules, and that's not necessarily true. The order of your meeting can be whatever you decide to set.
Hmm.
And if you have set it and somebody wants to change the order of the meeting, that can also be done at the meeting by 2/3 majority.
Mhm.
Awkward number in a 5-person board, but anyway, that's besides the point. Well, it's actually 0.3, it's 3.333 or 3.33, so depends if you round it down. But yeah, I guess it would be 4, but at any rate, I guess, so what I was feeling was, okay, this is tested something. This is kind of an interesting scenario that happened, and I could see, this isn't working. And that is, if we have business arising before our delegations from our partner group and before the opportunity for written questions, agenda items, then we're kind of defeating the purpose of having those partner groups make presentations and public comment via written paper if we bring up something like a motion before those groups and people have an opportunity to speak for that motion on the agenda. So I'm wondering if anybody has an appetite to move business arising, not that this has never happened, as far as I can understand, this has never happened. This was the first time. So that's why I found it an interesting test. So it may not happen again for 10 years. I don't know. But I'm wondering if anybody has a problem with moving business arising, number 6 presently, down to after number 10, after public questions and comments. What
Eve,
folks think of that?
Oh, I thought you were, that's funny. I thought you were going to go the other way
Yeah.
to make it be number 5, swap 5 basically, and we'll find a place for it because we don't ask questions of our partner groups. This is the board's meeting and the board's agenda. So partner groups are on the agenda and we don't question their presentation to us. And I would let Matt's here to speak to it. I don't know as he particularly wants the public questioning his report as it has landed that evening. What you're trying to get to was the French Creek thing. and having Glenn and making his comments ahead of hearing what staff had to say. And that presentations. So I guess two parts to that is I don't think you can expect this is a meeting of the board's agenda. So I don't think the public questioning our partner groups presentations is a good thing or appropriate, but I won't speak for them. Maybe they do want questions from the public. Then we better rethink our agenda completely. But where's your example? It's happened once. We've only seen it once. And if I got the example wrong, then I thought you'd be moving business arising to way ahead, not the other way.
Oh, okay. Well, here's what I'm thinking, because, you know, we do have motions set on our agenda. Oftentimes they're coming out of Ed committee or other things, or maybe it's around budget. And actually our partner group, you do have an opportunity to speak. We may not respond, but they have an opportunity to speak to those motions that are upcoming on an agenda. Let's say it's around, we want to open a school for basket weaving. Okay, and maybe we have a motion later on in our agenda. We want to open a school for basket weaving. And maybe we have some of our partner groups that have a concern around that for budgetary reasons or for whatever reason. So they have an opportunity during their presentations to speak to that upcoming motion. We haven't voted on it. We haven't debated it in public, but they have an opportunity to speak and we have an opportunity to listen. And we may use that in our deliberations of our vote.
Yeah, they have that now. They have that now.
Yes, they do have that now, but with having business arising, sometimes like what happened, and I believe it was around recording of meetings, I think.
Yeah.
And that was the example I was thinking of. So that came to business arising, and we had a motion that came out of there, and it came before nobody could have an opportunity to speak to it. Not our partner groups or members of the public via written comment or question, because it came before the delegations and presentations. So that's why I'm thinking if we have any motions, regardless of whether they're business arising or coming up later on the agenda, I think they should all come after, in case so that we give our partner groups and members of the public an opportunity to comment on them. That's my thinking on that.
But it's business arising from the minutes. So that's a previous meeting.
You're muted.
Yes,
Julie.
and so I think I think this was around the recording of our meeting. Or was it? Yes, I think it was. and so we had talked about it in January. And then it came back for us to talk about in February, and it came under business arising from the minutes because we had talked about it in January, but we didn't just talk about it. We actually had a motion attached to it. And so I think we could talk about it there, but I think if we had a motion attached to it, the motion should always go after our partner groups and public have an opportunity to make a comment. That's my thought on that.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I think I understand it now. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Elaine.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to get it. Yeah, I don't have my Robert's Rules of Order book here, so I can't look that up. I think there is a sort of a schedule of how you do meetings but you know, heck, we change everything anyway. I guess my concern is I don't want the public just to come. Like, I want the public to come and hear our whole meeting. You guys know this about me. You know, I'm one of these people that, you know, like, give me 4 hours and I'll tell you what the school district's like. So I just don't want people to come, make a comment and then take off. So I don't know, Julie, moving it up. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to oppose you on that, but at the same time, I don't want people just, you know, zipping in to comment and then they don't hear the rest of the discussion and they just wander off, and then we do something and they think we've done something without consulting. I don't think that's fair. So, and then I've got some other stuff, of course, because I looked at it all.
Ron.
I was actually looking at the Roberts Rules of Order, and it doesn't actually address that item, business arising from the minutes. It very well could be that we didn't place the item in the correct spot. And again, absolutely to Julie's point, it came out of the minutes from the previous meeting that spoke to addressing the issue of Zoom sessions and that kind of stuff. And whether or not it should have been placed as a business arising from the minutes, just because we talked about it in the previous meeting, it probably could have been added into the action section as just a new motion, a motion that Superintendent Jory could speak to in terms of the response to the motion that was in the previous meeting. All I'm saying, I guess what I'm getting at is, it very well could be we don't need to change the order, but in this case, maybe we should have placed the response to the motion from the previous meeting differently in the agenda. And therefore it would have gone into either the action items likely, and then it could have allowed for discussion, or like I said, it could have allowed for public conversation on some of those things. But absolutely, by us embedding into the business arising from minutes, it doesn't allow for public conversation. Absolutely. So I'm just wondering if it would have been better, if we would have been better off placing the agenda item differently.
And that, I think that's my point, Ron. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can certainly have the discussion of business arising. We can have a discussion, but any decision-making process via a motion, I believe, should come later on in the agenda.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Barry, you have a comment?
The meetings belong to the board. I mean, it's a board meeting in public. But there's a difference between a board meeting in public and a public hearing, which is a hearing of the public. So, my point is that if we, from what I'm understanding, the request here is that we throw the board meeting open to public comments during the board meeting is not the function of the board meeting. I mean, if we want to have a public hearing about something, then we do that. So, the board meetings belong to the public or to the board, and so does the agenda.
Is that it, Bear? Thank you. Julie, and then we're gonna move on, I think.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's saying that this isn't a meeting of the board in public. But this, for me, is saying we respect, the comments and of our partner groups and members of the public for items coming up for decision later in the agenda. That's the big piece to me. If I'm voting on a motion, I want to be as well informed as I can on that motion. And part of being well informed involves hearing from our partner groups and perhaps members of the public via the written comment section. So that's an important piece of my decision-making process.
Okay, so we'll be mindful of our agenda setting a bit more closely.
Okay, that's gonna be the outcome. You okay with that, Julie?
Can I just make one more comment?
Sure.
So, like for instance, at the last, I think it was at the education meeting, we had a delegation that came in and talked to us about the cell tower. And that gave us time to think about that. And that's, we have delegations that come, and we also have committees that people come in and can express things. So I'm just, I appreciate what you just said, Julie, because it clarified what you were asking for. But I think there are opportunities for people to express things that are going to come up. And yeah, we'll consider this.
All right. So you all done, Julie?
I'm just wondering, in terms of this bylaw, are we able to put in, like maybe at number 6, business arising from the minute? Could we put a little caveat in there or something, generally motions not considered at this time or something, maybe even the word generally, so that if, again, something comes up in some reason, for some strange reason. But if you had a little caveat in there, generally motions are not considered in this part, or something like that, just to clarify it for future boards and future staff. I mean, we may understand the concept, but
Elaine,
Yeah, you want some more stuff? Okay, here's my other comments on bylaw 3. It needs a really careful look. Bylaw 3 is really important, and it kind of needs to be constantly looked at. I think the title needs changing to something like meeting of the board in public, right? Instead of, I think it's now, I don't have the policy in front of me, I just got my notes, but I think it's now like regular board meeting or something.
Meetings of the board.
Yeah, so let's make it meetings of the board in public. And then when people read that, they won't go, oh, okay, I get to be part of that in some other way. Work on committee mandates. I wasn't clear if those committee mandates needed updating, because I think we've updated them all. And I didn't see any underlining or anything there, so I didn't think that had been done. And then when I started looking, I was going to use that word, that T word. When I started looking at the website, I found some other stuff that's just out there, and it's not as a part of our governance documents. And you know how that makes me a little worried. So I saw the guiding principles for organizational decision-making, and it's a nice looking document. I think it could be subsumed into this document with a little massaging and a little tweaking. And I'm not offering to do it because, like I've done a lot of that. But could you take a look at all of those things?
I'm sorry, I'm lost. Where are you, Elaine? What are you, I'm sorry.
Okay, when you go on the website, or at least when I went on the website the last time, and you know how the website kind of ghosts and sometimes you go all different places. The last time I went on the website under Board of Education, and I looked at, there was something under Board of Education that was called Guiding Principles for Organizational Decision Making. And I'm not sure if it was in the policy section or where, but it's not a bad document, but it's not in our governance documents. So like, we don't pay much attention to it. And it's good stuff. So let's see if we can put it in here, and then we'll pay more attention to it.
Yeah,
At least we'll read it every 4 years.
What's it called again?
It's called Guiding Principles for Organizational Decision Making. I found it. I don't know. I'd probably never be able to find it again on that website.
we will take a look at it.
Okay, sounds good.
And that was guiding principles for organizational
Guiding
decision.
Principles of organizational decision making.
Or for
Peter.
organizational decision making.
You asked Peter this.
Do you have the link? Do you have the document in front of you? Can you
I do
send that to
not.
us?
I do not. I will try and find it again, Peter, and send it to you. But I got stuff that was titled Eric Fromm the last time I looked at the policies, and it's concerning.
I'm awesome at the internet, but if any kind of help would be appreciated.
Yeah,
if you
okay. I'll
can.
try and find the link.
Thank you. Okay, so shall we move on? We're gonna look at all of this stuff and see if there's changes that need to be made. All right, the next thing on the agenda is administrative procedures of the board policy 105, use of school facilities. And Ron, you're gonna speak to this.
Sure. Yes, so this is a follow-up of the finance and operations discussion that talked about how this admin procedure will be brought back to the board in a different format, recognizing some of the recommendations that staff have made to the actual writing of it. The policy itself is not being asked to change, it's the AP itself. And so just highlighting a couple of the areas, the definitions of users we talked about in terms of we've got school programs, we have youth programs, and we have not-for-profit, and then we've got commercial. And so the recommendation is that we change the youth programs just to include, just to include the youth programs with no definition between volunteer versus paid instructors. And what was pointed out originally was sometimes it's hard for us to get from the organization whether or not they are paid or if they are just being given an honorarium and the definition of that. This will just make it easier that the definition of a youth program will be groups operating solely for the youth under 18 and where they are organized to teach activities. So that's the one change, and that will obviously be reflected into the Schedule A hourly rates. We would basically just have one youth program fee at $5 for a classroom, $10 for room other than classroom, gym at 15, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It would basically just be a single youth program fee. So that's the one change. And then the second change that we talked about was the introduction of an application fee, recognizing that more and more, it's getting a little bit complicated in terms of how organizations come forward with their application, because if they don't necessarily have to pay anything up front, they're basically booking blocks of time that sometimes impedes the ability for other organizations to come forward. So once again, this is really about the processing cost that is going, the administrative costs that we have to bear as we organize this work, recognizing that 25 at least will get us some dollars for the work that we do to set these organizations up in the right school at the right time and giving equitable access to all organizations that may want access to our schools. That I think is it.
Okay,
I'm all
any
for-
questions? Oh, Julie?
That all makes sense, Ron. Every time we try and clarify it, it helps. I'm just wondering, like in the scenario where a student is organizing something that is actually outside of their curriculum or their course load, but they are perhaps organizing some meeting or forum. Will that be different? Will they still have to have the $25 application fee? Our students are, we have we have some pretty strong leaders in our student groups, and they are organizing outside events outside of school, and they may want to use our school venues, and I'm just wondering what would happen there.
I would encourage them to work with a school
Sure,
kind of thing, and so therefore they can sort of any school functions have no cost to the school itself, obviously, and so it would be in their, I won't say their best interest, and that's not to say that it may not be their school that they want to attend, but again, if they go through their administrators, they can get the fees waived and have access to our schools. But to your point, absolutely, I'm sure there's times when they want to, I don't know, want to do a club that may not be at their school or something. If they work with a school administrator, then obviously they can waive the fees at no cost, obviously.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted, so that would be like, okay, for example, I just went to a meeting that was organized by one of our high school students with our local MP, Gord Johns, the other night. Now, that was separate from any of the school work that student does. It was outside of any of the curriculum that student does, but it was a benefit to the community and also to other students that happened to show up at that meeting as well. And I would like to think that we could make the facilities available to that student just for doing community good work.
Well, yeah, and definitely like school programs, including extracurricular activities. And so you could obviously use the definition that these are not curricular. These are outside the curriculum. And this is just something that a student is passionate about, and we will work with them, or obviously we will do everything we can to support that passion through giving them access to the sites that we have.
Yeah, I think I think that the student must have had some discussion with the school principal or a teacher or something, because if they're going totally outside of everything in the system and made a booking, went to ops and maintenance and things like that, and didn't have a name like that attached, they would have to show insurance, I would think. They would have to prove that they've got liability insurance and their risk and they're taking it, they, the student. And so I'm not disagreeing that that student shouldn't do it, but I suspect most of them have gone through a principal and said, look, you can lose classroom A from 7 to 9 tonight or something like that. And then there's the linkage there, because if they're really doing this just as a student all by themselves and everything else, then they're going to need to prove liability insurance.
Okay. And no more discussion. We'll move on to our next agenda item. Which my agenda is getting lost in all of these bylaws and policies. It is. The living wage, Ron, or I mean, Peter, we're going to table the living wage. to another
Yes, please. Lots to talk about in this meeting, and it requires me to do some further revising before I'm comfortable bringing it back to this audience. So we'll just take another month and do that and get on with our conversations for today, if that's all right with everyone.
The next agenda item is long service. I'm on the retirement committee with Eve, and we've had some discussion. I actually brought a motion forward at our last meeting that we include 10 years along with 20 years for recognition of people's employment. And then when I brought it to my fellow policy person, Mr. Jory, he liked the idea of it being 10, 20, and 30 being recognized. So I'm going to let him speak on that. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think we've had a bit of an ongoing conversation around how to connect with and recognize employees across the school district, noting that a number of things have kind of been a practice, and some of these practices got interrupted during COVID, and it would be nice to come to some kind of agreement on what it is that the Board of Education is going to do on a consistent and ongoing manner. I think the long service awards would be a nice place to start and actually expand that and have a little bit more reach around the school district. I know there's a lot of employees out there that have worked in the district for some amount of time, and it would be nice to just check in and say, thanks for that. Here's your 10, here's your 20. We see you and we appreciate you. I also think that there's a chance here, and I have raised this before, I believe, to get out there and do something a little bit more fulsome. The oranges or whatever we've done in the past, chocolates, coffee or whatever. That's all good. Maybe even full luncheons every other year at a school, and maybe that'd be an opportunity to say hello and say a few things and to hand the service recognition out, something like that. I'd love to have that discussion in one of our sessions. I think it's something that you might want to consider. But this is actually, if we go further, that's great. This is a great way to start, I think.
Great. Elaine.
Yeah, Eve probably knows what I'm going to say, because I was on the long-term service and retirement committee for I don't know how many years, because I wanted to expand it. And I've always felt a little, well, I'll say a lot, uncomfortable going out to the schools and giving them an umbrella and 3 chocolate bars at 20 years and saying, geez, thank you for your service. I'm one of these people. I even put forward at one point in the committee meeting the suggestion that we should send out a little birthday greeting every birthday and say thanks for your service or whatever. I think that recognition of our staff, our employees, is absolutely essential, and I'm glad that the board actually stepped up last year and increased the budget a bit so that we could buy a dinner for somebody. But it's been an ongoing kind of back and forth between how much money and what kind of recognition. But I would sure like to do more. And thank you for bringing this forward. And Yeah, it's in the definitions in the policy, so it does require a policy change, so it's gonna have to go to 3 readings sadly, because when I wrote those definitions, I wanted to make it clear what we were doing. It would be nice if we could. No, I guess it's still the board needs to make that decision. I was thinking it'd be nice if it just went into AP, but I think it's still the board. It's a board subcommittee. But yeah, do more.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Eve speak and then I'm gonna have a comment and then we can move on.
So Peter, if you're right on the roll with your service and recognition, community meets at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, you can come and give the pitch to the gang. I don't think anyone ever has disagreed on the whole notion of that, for absolutely sure. And the 30-year, we probably just didn't even think big enough, like you. Think big and go, but you're gonna have to then also, I think we're gonna have to seriously look at the budget, because $10,000 doesn't cut it between long service and retirement. And so it's the money.
Right.
But mark in your calendar, I can send you the Zoom link, Peter, and you can speak to the group on recognition. Because we'll be talking.
Oops, sorry, Eve. I cut you off.
He's got a chamber meeting. He's already found his excuse.
Matt,
Thanks, Carol. I just want to say that recognition does not always have to be monetized. I think if the number of teachers that are doing the fantastic things around, around this district, if you can find the time and if it gets advertised, you can see that teacher, whether it's doing a basketball district-wide tournament, or if they're doing a chess tournament or the running club or any of these other functions that are going along in the district. I really believe, I'll speak from me personally, if I was a teacher and having somebody from the trustee and I am a teacher. If I was in the classroom, let's rephrase that. If I was in the classroom right now, I will always really appreciate it. Just a simple acknowledgement of something that I've put my volunteer time towards, or if I've shown an increase in something that happens within the district. So simply being there and giving accolades from trustees, from senior admin, and from administration go a long ways as well. So it doesn't always have to be monetary, although a nice meal and something like that is definitely appreciative after 10 and 20 and 30-year services.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just want to say that I think that recognition of staff is really important. I know for myself as a staff member, when I felt appreciated, I wanted to give more. And so I want to be on a board that really appreciates the work of the employees of the district, because then I think they give as much as they possibly have in their bucket to give to the kids. So I think recognizing them personally when they're doing good work is a great thing, but I also think having something that says, yes, we recognize these employees at 10, 20, and 30 years is something that is a reminder that you need to go out and appreciate those people. Elaine.
This reminds me, what did we decide to do for QP Appreciation Day?
We haven't done that yet.
No, it's in the hopper.
It's
Is
in
it?
the-
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And Carrie.
I was just going to say that, of course, PACs love reasons to celebrate, and those are the kind of things that we like doing to bring the communities together. So even if it was on the website, or if you've guys, like Matt said, it doesn't have to be something that costs money. If there's something there that PACs can take on and reference going, we know that such and such individuals are at their school, we always like to find ways to celebrate them as well.
Sounds good.
Carrie, how many schools do volunteer appreciation teas now anymore at the end of the year? I know COVID's kicked us in the gut there, but I don't know as many of them do that anymore.
That's a good question, because it's typically we don't put those on. It's usually the administration that puts it on for the volunteers. It's usually the other way around, is that it's more of a surprise to the parents and guardians and the volunteers.
Yeah, we work both ways.
Mm. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, but I think that is something that we could start honoring. I know at Springwood last year, we started a Wolfies Award. So at the end of the year, we created like a Wolfie. We took all the we took all the staff members and we honored them for something like, you know, best, I don't know,
Right.
best dressed teacher or things like this. And we did that and honored everybody that way. But I think, yeah, you're right. The culture both back and forth is a good idea.
It is. And so we're going to be looking at this. We'll take it back to our committee and have a discussion, and it sounds like everybody is okay with us doing something like that. So we'll bring it forward again when we've got it solidified with our group. And thank you, everybody. So moving on, policies potentially going to first reading, and Ron is going to speak on both of these, A and B. So we'll go with A. Ron?
Yes. Thank you. So yes, the financial reporting, 106. So just like reflective of what's gone on in the last number of years. In 2018, the ministry did a large outreach to the public in terms of the funding model review. And then they introduced, or they developed some, obviously, an understanding of what the expectations are going forward. So they had some recommendations on the funding, on the reporting, on the transparency involved, and the accountability, obviously, aspects of school districts, provincial school districts. Most of the, I won't say most, half the recommendations were implemented right away. Some were are being implemented over time. And so part and parcel with the latest one on, and the work that the board did last year in addressing the surplus policy, we made some changes to this policy regarding surpluses. This year, if you want, the priority is on the financial or the multi-year financial planning. And so both of those two areas are being fine-tuned or in this policy that's being presented to you. Also, behind the scenes, policy analysts are being added to the Ministry of Education's finance and reporting side to review what boards have presently. And so they looked at ours and sent us a note in terms of there's areas that need to be updated, and that for us, it's the surplus definition in the inclusion of using capital for or using surpluses for capital projects. So the inclusion of that, as well as just a better definition of what surpluses are. And then the other thing that we weren't compliant, that we now have to be compliant because it's now a mandate this year, is that multi-year planning side of things. And so there's new language embedded in this, in the AP and the policy to include multi-year reporting, as well as the obviously the recognition of the First Nations in the process. So what you see before you is obviously the articulation of that. And truthfully, what I ended up doing was I sent our current surplus to Saban out of the ministry to review ours, just to find out and get the language so that we've got the correct language in these different areas. And so these are his recommendations coming forward. Minor tweaks that we've done, obviously, in reviewing it in terms of what we like to see, obviously operating budget versus operating expenses. But again, they've included obviously the First Nations and Métis Nation in terms of the planning and review. The language for the multi-year financial plans is verbatim from himself in terms of what we must do. Some of these things are still a work in progress, even on the part of the ministry. They're still fine-tuning what that report will look like, but they know what it's going to include. They just don't know exactly the format. And so we've got some webinars organized in the next month or two that will walk us through what the expectations are for that report. The idea being, as I've talked about in budget and obviously and talked about in some of our stakeholder meetings, is that we align our budgeting and our conversations around budgeting and finance over multiple years, and also align it against our strategic planning processes and our educational priorities, kind of thing. So what you see before you is certainly the recommendations that they've brought forward. Some of it is obviously changing the language, as I said, about what is the definition of an operating surplus. Well, it's implied that the unappropriate operating surplus is a contingency. And so again, they've just gotten rid of some of that redundant language, as well as embedding obviously in that, that we can say that we can put aside money, not just for internally restricted, not just for local capital, but also for future capital costs sharing. So that is what's before you. I'll take questions or what have you.
Yeah, are there any questions? Seeing none. Uh,
It can go
are we
forward.
just- Pardon me?
It can go forward. I move
Yep.
that it go forward to the first reading at the regular board meeting next week.
And do we vote on that?
Sort of thumbs up consensus.
All in favor?
Barry?
Yes. Where are you, Barry? He's gone. There's 4 of us in favor. I'm not sure what happened to Barry.
5 in favor, I'm here.
Oh, are you there?
Yeah, I just have my screen turned on.
Okay. All right. And the next item, Ron, that's yours as well. B.
Yes, so the privacy management and accountability. And so this is, as of February 1st, the FIPA or FOIP as we call it, but anyways, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act now requires, as of February 1st, 2023, now requires public bodies to develop a privacy management program. The PMP is evolving, and evolving, and I'm actually just reading verbatim on what they were sort of sharing with us at various points. So the PMP is an evolving set of policies, procedures, and tools developed by the public body to enable systematic privacy protection throughout the personal information lifecycle. And then likewise, the head of the public body must develop a privacy management program for the public body. And so the head in our case is Superintendent Jory, as identified in the AP and the policy. The privacy officer is myself. And so it really comes around as the superintendent of the public body in this case, developing policy that not only includes what we had, which was because we always had, clearly we've got 2 APs already on the books. Let me just double check what they are. Information management and access that spoke to what information we have, what we keep, employee personnel information, that kind of stuff, the investigation of complaints, et cetera, errors and omissions. And then we also had one for one for another. What was the third? Oh, in privacy. Oh, I guess we only actually had one AP that had a multitude of stuff. So that one remains. There's a little bit of wordsmithing on the one that we've got. Basically rename it to include the renamed policy 900, but we've now added 2 new policies that we didn't have before. And one is the privacy impact assessments, and one is the privacy breach response. And again, so for us, it means from the privacy impact assessments, we actually always did them. So through Leslie's office in the IT, Leslie Rowan, our principal of IT, whenever a new software came before her, we would do a privacy impact assessment or personal information assessment on it. And basically it was through the software supplier, we would have to go through a series of steps in terms of identifying what data is being collected, what is the need for that data, et cetera, including the question on where is that data stored, where's the data warehouse kind of thing. And so with the new language of the privacy or of FOIP, FIPA, it's allowed public bodies actually to, like one of the things that changed predominantly from the where is it being housed, where's the data being housed, is it allows the housing of data offshore, as it were, so out of Canadian area, as long as we do our due diligence and understanding with the supplier of what is the impact should that, should it be lost, et cetera, et cetera. So all of it really is saying is you be the judge. This is what they're saying to the public body. You be the judge and be the holder of that information, as long as you have that discussion or transparency to the public on where it's housed, how it's housed, and then recognizing that should it be breached, what are the steps you're going to take, not just to protect it, but should it be, should the privacy information be breached in some manner? And so those two APs are recognizing the areas that we were, that we didn't necessarily have in AP. And so really all we're doing is addressing it in an AP to be more articulate in what we're doing from the privacy impact or the personal info, from the personal information. And likewise, what will happen should there be a breach, and again, the steps to follow for staff reaching out to myself as the privacy officer, and then the head of the public body should it go that far. So really it's about, again, updating our policy to include those areas, as well as 2 new APs to truly address what we didn't have on paper.
Julie?
Okay, thanks, Ron. I find this a really timely policy to bring forward. And it's so dense. There's actually a lot in it. So forgive me if I mention things that have been addressed or are being addressed. I'm going to start with the easy stuff. Down under description of services, there's a lot of outdated, I think, things referring to floppy disks and dot matrix printers, things like that. I think there's the outdated vocabulary we can look through and change. I also think in this particular policy, there's a lot of links out, in particular, things like the student FOIPA personal info consent, that could be a link directly to the form. And there's a few places like
So
that.
these are,
too.
sorry, just a point of clarification. This is not policy, right? This is in the APs, right, Julie?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
No,
thanks.
this is, wait a minute, let's see what I get to. Yeah, that's AP stuff.
Okay. great.
Now, but if I go straight to the policy, I'll go there. I found this really timely because number 7, upon their child's initial enrollment, parents, guardians will complete and submit the form entitled Student FOIPA Personal Information Consent. And I found this timely because it goes directly to the conversation we're having around recording meetings. And so then this conversation will be coming up tomorrow during EdCal. Because within that, it specifically mentions the use of your child's image and or name on YouTube and social media. So we actually already have something like that. We already have this happening in our district. So that's just something I wanted to point out, that if parents have signed that student FOIPA personal info consent, theoretically, the student should be fine in these meetings. But I'm going to leave that for the discussion for tomorrow. But it is the kind of, and I also think, again, this is really timely. And when Ron was talking about the storing of offshore data, and this has always been a concern to me for a number of years, right back to the Canada census forms, when Canada would have our census forms processed in the United States. And under United States law, they had access and could ask for that information. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about when we have offshore data of our student data, and particularly now when the talk is around TikTok and what other places like China is doing with that information. So I do think it's a really worthwhile conversation, and I think we might want to have some really pointed and directed, articulate very clearly what we mean and what that offshore data storing means. I think it's fraught with some problems in today's political climate.
Yeah, and in fairness, I'm not advocating, I'm not recommending that we change our position on offshore data storage. And so absolutely, I have no, again, this would be through the superintendent as the head of. It opens the door to allow, should a school district want to take on a supplier that happens to store things in the cloud and provable in another area, a school district can decide that for themselves in that case. And so it would be, it's really putting the onus on the public body to make that decision rather than the act weighing in on it. And so in fairness, I'm not suggesting we change practice, and that would be still to be forcing our suppliers to find in Canada storage abilities, storage sites. But it does allow, the act being changed in that manner allows public bodies to take on that risk themselves.
Okay, thanks for that. All I'm saying is, I don't mind this going to first reading.
Yep.
Because that's just, get it first reading. Theoretically, it goes out in public, so it's in public right now. And we can address a lot of these things. But I do find that there's quite a bit in here in the AP and in the policy that we want to take a closer look at and address. And I would encourage anybody that's coming to EdCow tomorrow to please have another look at the student FOIPA personal info consent, because that is going to go directly to our conversation about recording EdCow.
And where is that? Sorry, I've gone through.
I will
everything
send you
twice.
the link. I found it on our school district website. And I will send the link in chat though to it directly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
It's not here in the policy statement.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see it. Yeah, I looked for it and it wasn't included. I'm sure it's an addenda normally, is it? I would assume it is. But anyway, recognizing there's lots of places in there to have links.
Are you good, Julie? Yep. Thank you so much. Elaine? And then
Yeah,
we'll move
just on process here. I want to be clear that policy has 3 readings. Okay, AP has 1. All right, and AP is the job of the operational side of our organization. So Peter, I'm wondering if you have had an opportunity to look at that and the AP and that and make the changes that need to be made, because without the policy right in front of me, but it sounds like most of it is AP.
Yes.
I've only had a cursory look at it. Ron and I will sit down and have one more go before we put it online.
Okay, so it won't go to this board meeting?
Well, in truth, I'm not wanting to weigh in and stifle the debate. The only thing in the policy, we're adding a line that basically says include being open, transparent about the purposes for which the personal information may be collected and used. I think that's the only line in the policy itself that's new.
Yes.
But truly there is, and again, I'm not going to weigh in on should it or shouldn't be taken and voted on and 3 versus 1 reading kind of thing. I think it's comprehensive enough that you want to take it public in a sense and walk it through at least one meeting kind of thing. Should you take it forward for more than that? That's up to yourselves, but certainly the policy itself only really has the 1 line item addendum, but the AP, the 1 AP always was there. There's some slight changes to the 1 AP, and then the additional 2 APs are brand new.
Right.
And so absolutely, to your point, APs are normally a staff function. I think we're still, personally, I think we're still kind of working out the bugs of how we handle APs if they're attached to a policy that's being changed. But I'll leave that in our capable hands of our superintendent and chair.
Okay.
Oh, Peter.
That I was just looking at the form that Julie put up. This is kind of boilerplate stuff in BC now as of, and that's 14-15 was when it was brand new. Judith, what's Judith? A long-serving lawyer, Harrison Company. And it had a big profile in her province. This was, I think, one of the last things she wrote before going into retirement. And so basically have your, what I called inside outside. You have, if parents sign, you can use, school content and publish it in a newsletter or on your website. And then the outside is when media comes in you know, they can take pictures of a basketball game or some kind of event and publish those, and they have the right to do that. What it also says in here, if you, I mean, as much as we're always careful as staff to not have kids included in photos that we share, you know, we've got to also have a partnership with the parents and the students and have them avoid these events if they don't want to be seen. It's pretty rare that people don't want to be included, but it does happen from time to time. And so that line is in there as a kind of an exception.
Yeah, the line with limited or public access scares me. Sorry, reading the whole thing.
Okay, so moving forward on B 900, privacy management and accountability and APs, are we going to vote as trustees on moving it to a first reading?
Yep, sure.
All right, all in favor? Thank you. It's moved.
I think we can handle the AP process, Elaine, through agenda setting. We just have 3 readings of the policy and we only hear next week all of it. Then once the AP, we probably should split it, actually. I bet. Karen, help me. Ron, help. Sorry.
Moving on then, policies, number 4, policies potentially going to a second reading, there are none. And then number 5, policies potentially going to third and final reading, and A 508, career education, and that's you, Peter.
Actually, I'll just defer this to Director Terpstra. Are you on the line there, Rudy?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, everyone. So do you want me to speak to the AP specifically or the policy, which I've already done? Or are there any questions?
Oh, sorry about that. Put you on the spot a little bit. So this
No,
is
yeah.
potentially third reading.
Right.
The board has heard the description of why we have a career education policy and you know what you've put into it. I believe we have had the conversation about the AP last month. And so basically this is there anything more to add to the conversation before we ask that it be moved up to the board meeting for third and final reading?
Yeah, thanks. And just as you can see in the AP, just for clarity, because I know Head Start, dual credit always come up, and now we're in what's work experience, which is actually called, there's 2 categories, work and trades and train and trades. Train and trades is kids going to BIU, potentially basically taking college courses. And we also have an apprenticeship program through that. And then there's the work and trades, which is mostly work experience, covering. All of these, of course, have big ministry documents that guide the work. And out of this, our next step that Superintendent Jory is directing us all to is handbooks that we will be writing for these staffs in the upcoming year. Any questions about those?
Elaine has a question.
Yeah, so would it be correct to say that the first one is like the old Head Start program, kind of, sort of?
Yeah, so Head Start actually comes under youth work and trade, actually the second one, yeah. The first one is really work experience, period.
Okay.
Which work experience can be not paid.
Right.
Correct.
So if there's no further questions, do we just move this to the board meeting on Thursday night?
Yep.
We don't have to vote on it?
No.
Third re- Or we do vote?
Well, we can't. I mean, it's a third reading. If we had something to say, we're about 2 readings too late.
Yeah, no,
Right.
we do actually officially move it forward to third reading.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
No,
can I have a show of hands of everybody that is in agreement for this policy or this?
Yep.
Third reading. Thank you very much. So it's carried. And then the last one is field experiences. consider with the board 100 sustainable practices, and Peter.
Yeah, so we've had a bit of an ongoing conversation around field trips. It's been a topic of interest for a number of months. And in the last conversation, it was, how does this fit with sustainable practices? Is there a direct contradiction? And what I would say is no. I mean, sustainable practices are something that we always need to consider. And I think that the policy really does articulate that very strongly. In the AP is where it gets specific, and there's a line in there, and I think it's item 5. Hang on a second here. Number 5, principals and vice principals will be responsible for ensuring that climate action is a consideration for field trips in keeping with board policy 502. So it basically directs our admin staff to be cognizant of that before they move a field trip to the next level. Go back to the draft here, the draft changes that I've put in front of you. I've been a little bit more specific here, and I think that was out of our conversation. Item 2E, ensure that students be educated regarding the environmental impact and that participating students give evidence of activities intended to offset environmental impact. So that's one piece. It was an attempt to get specific and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And so that I mean, we could do some language like that back in 100 and match it. But that's another conversation for another day or for next month or sometime. So that was one of the two things that are being discussed. And then the second topic of conversation, and I recognize we don't have consensus on this, is what do we do with these field trips? Do we continue to take them to the Board of Education in one format or another, or do we delegate that authority to staff, specifically me? And so the way that this currently stands right now is that I will be approving them. Now, last month there was a bit of a discussion. It really, I think, either unless we can come to some kind of consensus today, it's going to end up probably going to vote to determine whether it moves forward or not in that way. So here we are. And item 4, I will ensure that the board is informed of any emerging safety concerns. And I would say a perfect example of that would be, the spring of 2019. We've heard about this thing that's happening long far away from us. And then that thing got closer because it was going to be where our kids were going to go to. And that was a good time to put up an alert. Whether or not it was the right call to flag all of our field trips like we did that spring, I don't know. But we know that yes, maybe the challenge was, would our kids get stuck over there perhaps? And so things like that, things that might impact the well-being of our children and the general sense of security amongst our parents and community should be brought to your attention. So this is where we're at. I'll turn the conversation back to you.
Okay, so Eve, if you could help me with this. So this is supposed to be going to the third and final reading. So today we're going to vote on, are we voting today on
Well,
this? Yes.
We're sort of voting today. We're quasi voting because we'd like to think we're doing things by consensus, but
Right.
unless otherwise stated, I would support it going to third and final reading.
Yeah, I mean, basically what you do is you ask Carol, is anybody opposed to this going to third and final reading?
Is there anybody opposed that's going for this going to, and then discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have something that you'd like to add with your opposition, Julie?
No, I think Peter actually. Thank you, Peter, for acknowledging the opposition, and I still stand by my comments from the last meeting.
All right.
So basically what you're saying then, Julie, is that you don't want this to move forward to the regular board meeting. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, because I do think I would like to see further discussion around the superintendent piece. I do think that this should, all these international trips should come to the board for approval. I think that's a big one. I think that's the way most of the boards of the province do it. And so I'm kind of wonder, well, why are we doing it, differently? I think it's important enough that it should come to the board for approval. And yeah, and I don't think we've really addressed the affordability piece. personally.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're gonna hold the process then, and we're not gonna move this forward because we move these forward by consensus.
You can have consensus -1.
No, you can't have consensus -1.
Yes, you can. It was discussed at a partners liaison meeting by the parliamentarian Lisa.
Yeah, that she's
And
looking at
Thomas-
Robert's Rules of Order. She's not looking at true consensus.
Well,
So,
she answered the question because I asked it. You're too small a board, you get hamstrung. Consensus -1 is a way to proceed.
it is a way to proceed, but it's not consensus.
Peter,
I was wondering if we could have consensus -1 on whether we use consensus -1.
Exactly.
We
thought
already
of that.
came to a decision when we set these committees up that they would be by true consensus.
I don't know if we used the word true.
Hmm.
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did.
Other than that, we're true all the time to ourselves.
Well, I guess the truth is, it's gonna be up to our meeting to figure out whether we're gonna move this ahead or not. I would hold it, quite frankly, if you got more to say, Julie.
Well,
that
tell
you
you
wanna
what,
hold it.
I won't hold it up right now. I really appreciate the concept of consensus. I would love our board to have workshop on
Mhm.
consensus and true consensus. I will not hold it up at this point. However, I will be making my comments at the public
So-
board meeting.
Basically,
Okay.
what you're doing is you're stepping aside, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am. I'm not
Okay.
blocking. I'm not blocking at this point.
Okay, thank you.
okay, so can we have a
We
vote?
can, we
on
can move it forward.
moving it forward?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Don't need to.
Don't need to, but
All right, Elaine,
Yeah, I think we need a workshop again. Okay.
I definitely need a workshop.
We need a consensus on the workshop.
we went to having a workshop and I did the work with Mike Roberts at BCSTA about a workshop. And he says it's very difficult to do consensus with such a few number of people. If you've got hundreds, then you take a day or you take 3 days for everyone to go away, talk about it, think about it, come back and talk about it again and talk about it again.
Okay, we can refer-
He was unable to find a facilitator for us because we asked this when you brought this up when you were first elected. That consensus is very difficult to do when you have a very small board. You have
Let's bring it to a discussion meeting, okay? And talk about it there.
All right. Okay,
and see if you can find some people that would do some training.
I'd do the training.
No.
stop that.
Why
Elaine.
not? I've done Quaker consensus, Steve. I mean, I've done the coursework.
Well, I just think internally puts it a little too close to people being able to speak freely.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about it at the discussion meeting.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, I'll go on to number 6, which is future topics. Are there any future topics other than consensus?
No, we'll bring that at a different meeting.
Okay,
I really do think that we should start painting the bridge again. And I will step aside if people are not ready to do that, but I actually think the policy and bylaws need to be reviewed on a 4-year basis. And if we start now and go through them one by one sequentially, then we'll be able to make the small changes that need to be made.
are you saying we as a group or Peter and I as the policy committee?
Well, the way that we did it before was we did policy prep with superintendent and chair. I did a lot of the rewriting of policy. Superintendent did a lot of the rewriting of AP, and then we brought it to the policy committee.
Yeah, well, Peter and I'll discuss that, but I think we do have a bit of a plan going forward for now, so we'll leave it at that. And I don't think, I mean, I'm not experienced enough to be writing or rewriting policies myself, so I don't have the knowledge that you have, Elaine. Anyways, moving forward, our next, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, but our next meeting is Monday, May 15th at 1 o'clock in 2023. Please come to it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Carol, great meeting. Good.
Thanks, Carol.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
See you soon.
Well done.